Evening, everybody. If you'd like, you can open up your Bible to Judges chapter 15. Judges chapter 15. So we're looking at probably the most famous judge, Samson. And we've talked about the opportunity that I suppose is given to him, that God gave him. What was special about him? All right, he was really strong, but before, he was a Nazarite, and that was planned before he was even born. And so he was to be a Nazarite, and he was to be wholly devoted to the Lord. Now think about this. This is going to be the judge were deliverers from for God's people. So here was going to be a deliverer that was wholly devoted to the Lord, and was going to be, God was going to give incredible strength to. And there's just a lot of potential here. A lot of potential. But then in chapter 14, we see that things don't look as rosy as we might hope they would be. In chapter 14, verse 1, Samson went down to Timnah, and he saw a woman of Timnah, and she's a Philistine. And so here, what's his... he's supposed to be wholly devoted to the Lord, but where's his attention? With pagan women. Yeah, the flesh. That's exactly right. And you notice he saw this woman. And Colby, I know you made the point that he said, she's right in my eyes. She pleases me well. In other words, here he is being led. Well, that was exactly the problem with the period of the judges, wasn't it? That everybody was doing what was right in their own eyes. And Samson's just falling right along with that. He doesn't seem to be wholly devoted to the Lord. He doesn't seem to be much different.
He kind of fell in the same temptation that was actually proposed to David the king later on.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so he goes after her. Well, the Lord ends up, even though, as you said, he seems to be more devoted to the flesh, the Lord will use even that to accomplish his purposes. And so the Lord is going to use this conflict that's going to develop because of this relationship. So somebody just briefly walk me through this conflict between Samson and this woman. The proposal is made that they're going to get married, so there's going to be a wedding feast. What happens?
There's a challenge at the wedding feast.
A riddle is proposed. Who proposes it? Samson proposes it. Can the Philistines guess it? They can't guess it. That's right. What a great phrase. You would not have done so if you would not have plowed with my heifer. And so now how does Samson feel towards his heifer? Maybe it's stated in that comment. Yes, he's furious about this. Well, he takes out his frustration on some unsuspecting Philistines, and kills them. Gives their garments to the ones who had plowed with his heifer, and then what does he do? Now remember, this is supposed to be his wedding, and what does he do with his wife? Leaves her, leaves her, and goes back home. So, yes.
I have like the headers in my chapter, and it says Samson's wife. Okay. So I understand the wedding feast. So they actually are married?
I would say yes, in the sense that, again, there's a whole thing about ancient weddings that are different than ours, as far as the betrothal is said to be somebody's wife when they're betrothed, but they haven't actually come together and are living together at this point. So there's a lot of facets to this. So I would take it that Samson feels like she's his wife. He recognizes that, but the way that he's behaving is not like she's his wife. He turns around and leaves. And so what's the father-in-law, the woman's father, what does he think?
Well, he don't like her, so I'll give her to somebody.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously he's mad about all of how this went down, and understandably so. So apparently he's not interested in her anymore. So he gives her to his companion, Samson's best man. And I don't know that the best man was always like that the bridegroom got to choose the best man and said, hey, this is my best friend. I think it was somebody that was, it seems like all of these companions were just kind of placed there to make the party. So any other comments through chapter 14 that may help us as we go into chapter 15? All right, so we have the setting here, right? This is not a rosy picture. We started off, we had this promise of this Nazarite from birth that's going to deliver God's people, and now it's almost like we've gotten to a soap opera. We've got to see all this drama taking place here. But God's going to use this drama. So chapter 15. After a while, in the time of the wheat harvest, by the way, that's important. In the time of the wheat harvest, hold on to that. It happened that Samson visited his wife with a young goat. That's the way to make up. You have a fight with your spouse, bring them a young goat. That always works. And so he comes with a young goat, and he says to her father, let me go into my wife, into her room. But her father would not permit it, and he said, I really thought that you thoroughly hated her. Therefore I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister better than she? Please take her instead. Again, I think we're getting a picture probably maybe how things worked in the ancient culture more than they do today. But Samson feels like it's like, okay, all right, I got mad about that, but I'm over it now. Going to make up. Still like her. Comes with a young goat, but it's too late. And his little temper tantrum, and we see this characteristic in Samson at this point, cost him this opportunity. And so the father-in-law explains, well, I didn't think you were interested in her, so I gave her to somebody else.
Which seems like a pretty sound decision.
Yeah.
From a father.
Right. And so the next thing is to appease Samson. Well, what about her younger sister? By the way, does this remind you of anything else that we've seen in the Bible when it comes to giving a wife? Yes. Isn't it? And it's weird how we look at this and we go, who thinks of this? But apparently this was not that uncommon of a way of thinking at that time. And so what about her younger sister? Well, how does Samson feel about this? Well, that's reasonable. Okay. No, he's furious about this. And he says, this time I shall be blameless regarding the Philistines if I harm them. Is he implying that last time he was not blameless? That he lost his cool last time? But now he feels justified, fully justified in taking vengeance on the Philistines because that this took place. Here's what I would say. I don't think that what we're looking at when we look at Samson is we're looking at a man that is his passions under control in a lot of different ways. And he's not the most outstanding moral character at this. And when we're teaching this, I don't think that we should teach, hey, these attributes of Samson are the attributes we need to model. Samson is mentioned as a man of faith. And by faith, he did some amazing things, and we'll see that. He's not acting by faith in this, I don't believe.
And he's using a quality that God had gave him, and it seems like he's using the strength that was given to him by God, and he's kind of abusing that gift.
Now, I think that's exactly right. I think his motive in it is not what it should be. Is God still using Samson, even in his ill motives, to accomplish what God intended for him to accomplish? What did God say he was going to do with Samson? Begin to deliver the Israelites from the Philistines. And so here, God is using this because Samson is now very upset at the Philistines, and he's going to take vengeance on the Philistines for the perceived evil that has been done to him.
And see, the other side of it that we kind of don't take into account. Since God's actually going to deliver the Israelites from the Philistines, God may have set up these circumstances with these different women, knowing how mad it would make Samson, and in the process, he would actually accomplish God's goal of killing all these Philistines.
Yep. So in chapter 14 and verse 4, his father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord, talking about this meeting with this Philistine woman. So I think you're exactly right. I think the Lord is setting this up and using this, knowing how Samson will respond to this. So here's what Samson does. Verse 4. Samson went and he caught 300 foxes. He's quite the trapper. And he took torches and turned the foxes tail to tail and put a torch between each pair of tails. Now, what do you think a pair of foxes would do when they're tied together with flame between their tails? They're going to run. Are they going to run in a coordinated manner? That's exactly right. And they've got a torch attached to them. And what time of year is it? It's the harvest time. What does wheat look like when it's harvest? Is it lush and green? It looks like good tender, doesn't it? And so the foxes take off, and as they go through, of course, they're setting all of the fields on fire, and it burns up all the standing grain of the Philistines, and it burned up both the shock, the standing grain, as well as the vineyards and the olive groves. Now, wheat is an annual crop, and so if you lose all of your wheat, well, you've lost a big portion of your staple for the year, and all of your labor and expense of sowing that and planting that, and it's right to the time to harvest, and you lose all of that. But if you lose your vineyard or your olive grove, you've lost years of work to produce that.
And you don't have no capability of wine or fruit that's coming out of it. Plus,
And it's not going to be next year that you can replace it.
you don't have a lot of the olive oil at that time was used in cooking and a lot of other purposes.
Exactly.
Didn't they even use olive oil like to their lamps and stuff?
Yes, it was.
So I mean, they cut out their lights, they cut out their cooking, they cut out their.
These are the main staples of life here. They are.
It'd be like a big blight.
Yes, that's exactly right. Now, do you remember, I know I'm switching gears here, but we're about to come to why I'm switching gears. Do you remember when the companions of Samson went to his bride and said, "Tell us the riddle"? Do you remember what they threatened her with? Yeah, we'll burn your father's house down, basically you in it. Okay, so that was the threat that was made there. And so she caves because she doesn't want that to happen. And so that's the reason why she starts begging Samson to know. Now, notice verse 6. The Philistines said, "Who has done this?" And they answered, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken his wife and given her to his companion." So the Philistines came up and did what? Wow. So this is just a tragic series of events that takes place here. And so
The bad part of it is she's not even Samson's wife. She's married to the Philistine.
that's right. So bad things are happening here. Now, Samson hears about this. And he says, "Since you would do a thing like this, I will surely take revenge on you, and after that I'll cease." And so maybe I lost my cool the first time. I'm justified in the second time. Now I'm really upset. And after that, I'll get it all out of my system. And so he attacked them hip and thigh with a great slaughter. And he went down and dwelt at the cleft of the rock at Etam. Now, I don't know how many he killed in this. It was a great slaughter. Attacked them hip and thigh. Do you use that expression much? I suppose that meant with all that he had. I don't know what that means exactly. But that's from the context, that's what I would gather. And now he goes down into Judah's territory at the rock of Etam. You have something you were going to add?
No, I was
Okay. Anybody have anything you want to say?
Where is that rock at?
I don't know. I don't know if we have. I don't know if we have that on the map. I don't know it offhand, and I didn't refresh.
See the flag is over?
No, I didn't. I don't know if we know. Oh, well, there's Etam right there. So maybe that's the location below Bethlehem there.
Okay.
I don't know that. I'm just going off of this map, and I haven't researched that and looked that up, so I don't know.
I always thought that hip and thigh, that's where most of the muscle is.
That's true. Yeah,
That's why
with his strength, with all of his strength. That makes sense.
I found it interesting too, before we move on there, that after Samson had done that to the Philistines, they didn't go after him right there. They went after her and her father.
Yeah.
I don't know if they had learned their lesson with him and they were afraid of it,
Right.
or, I mean, he's going to get them anyway, but
Right.
it just kind of struck me odd that they would not.
Yeah.
Oh, it was Samson, but we're not. We're going to go after her.
Yeah.
And maybe the reason they didn't go after Samson after they probably figured out he done killed 30 of them, and then it would actually take a strong man with some real good talent with God's strength to actually catch that many foxes.
I have wondered about that. I don't know. The text doesn't say whether this is. It's possible for someone just by human skill to catch that many. That's what I'm trying to imagine. I'm trying to imagine how you take two foxes and tie their tails together. And what I envision here is I envision this man doing this. And you know how you ever tried to do something with a cat and the cat wants to get away? And you know what happens there? I imagine here are these two foxes doing this. And I'm going to tell you, it seems to me Samson's strength is often commented on. I would also have to say almost his invincibility in that he almost seems to be bulletproof. When 1,000 Philistines come at you with weapons and not a single weapon touches you, how I have it that maybe the foxes are chewing on him, but it doesn't hurt him. Arrows and spears bounce off of him,
They will bite you because
Sure.
they broke Tennessee. He would catch, but he wouldn't catch like 30. He'd catch one.
Yeah.
And he said a lot of times that bite him. I mean, he had bite
I
marks.
imagine. Well, I know what a house cat will do. What were you going to say?
I just wonder if at this time maybe it was more common to try to punish the root of the situation instead of maybe while something happened.
Maybe. That may be.
Maybe that's why they gave us that information.
Right. But now that he's attacked them hip and thigh with a great slaughter, they feel like we've got to do something. And so they gather their forces together, and the Philistines come up and encamp in Judah and deploy themselves against Lehi. And the men of Judah said, "Why have you come up against us?" And so they answered, "We've come up to arrest Samson to do to him as he has done to us." Then 3,000 men of Judah went where? Do you remember how we started off the book of Judges? Who shall go up to drive out the Lord's enemies? Judah will go up. Now Judah's banding together to do what? To go deliver God's judge over to the enemies. You see what a sad state of affairs. This would be a perfect time for them to say, let's rally around the one whom God and the Spirit of the Lord has come upon. We can take these Philistines. God will help us. But that's not what they do. They're cowards at this point. And so they come to Samson.
And just to add to what you and Steve were talking about there, they sent 3,000
Yeah,
to try to get him.
that's right.
That just shows you the strength.
That's exactly right. So they come to Samson there at the cleft of the rock at Edom, and they said, "Do you not know that the Philistines rule over us?" Yeah, that doesn't sound like the same Judah that we saw at the beginning of the book, does it? "What is this you've done to us?" And he said to them, "As they did to me, so I've done to them." And they said to him, "We've come down to arrest you, that we may deliver you into the hand of the Philistines." And then Samson said to them, "Swear to me that you will not kill me yourselves." Samson is pretty confident in the power that the Lord has given him. And he says, "You just tell me that you won't hurt me yourself." And so they swore to him, "No, but we will tie you securely and deliver you into the hands of the Philistines, but we will surely not kill you." And Samson's like, "Okay, I'm okay with that." And so they bind him, and what do they bind him with? How many ropes would it take to hold me?
I don't know.
You,
It wouldn't take two new ones. You could get by with a really old rope that's pretty much frayed, and it would hold me.
Kind of figure out that one zip tie put on you.
I think that's exactly right.
That's what the cops use now. They ain't got no cuffs.
So-
Zip tie.
Think about that they look at Samson and say, two new ropes, double time, secure. And Samson's like, "That's fine. I'm not worried about that. Go ahead." And so they tie him up and they bring him out to the Philistines. And you notice in verse 14, when they came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting against him. Then the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms became like flax that is burned in fire, and his bonds broke loose from his hands. Can you imagine having here's a candle and the flame, and just take a piece of hay or straw and pass it over that flame while pulling on it? No problem. 2 new ropes, no problem. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him. Mike, you were talking to me about, you said 4 times that it mentions that the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson. And Mike made an interesting point. In the book of Judges, how many times is it mentioned in the book of Judges? 7 times. And 4 of those times is with Samson. And here's one of those 4 occasions. And so the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him. He breaks this, and he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, reached out his hand and took it. And with the jawbone of the donkey, what did he do? 1,000. 1,000. Now, I tried to find a photo representing that, and I don't like that photo because I'm pretty sure that's more than 1,000 people there. But maybe it captures the concept of here's one man with a jawbone in his hand, and he's defeating an army of Philistines. And it seems without much problem. And it seems that he defeats all of the ones that were attacking them, or the others fled or something, because when it's over with, he seems to be left there alone. And he said, with the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps. With the jawbone of a donkey, I have slain 1,000 men. So this is kind of a proverb or a poem that he coins here on this spot. And that's right. So he gives somewhat of the imagery of what it must have looked like. Heaps upon heaps. Bodies everywhere of these Philistines that had been killed by this man. Any thoughts, comments through verse 16?
Back in verse 12, where he told the Israelites to swear to him that they would not kill him themselves, I kind of take that is still God's way of delivering the Israelites, because do you think he might be implying there that had they tried to kill him, he would have had to have killed them maybe?
Yeah.
And he didn't want to have to kill his own. That would be defeating the purpose of
Right.
what God was trying to do.
Yeah. I think that's a good implication there.
And also killing the 1,000 men. And I'm not trying to jump ahead and steal our thunder from later here, but when it's all said and done, and Samson pulls the pillars of the temple up, it says that he killed more people there than he had killed in his whole life.
Right.
So we see here that how many people he's killing, and just that kind of sheds some light on exactly how many he killed then.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
So do you think he was always strong, or was there certain times in his life where he was stronger? Because it says that the Spirit of the Lord came on him mightily.
Yeah. So I don't know, because, the first time that we see his strength displayed is when the lion attacks him, and it says the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. So I don't know if he was always strong or if there were occasions. He certainly is confident that the Spirit of the Lord is going to come upon him when he needs it, because he doesn't seem to be very concerned about that. I don't know the answer to that. That's a good question. I don't know.
And also, I think I was teaching Lucas one time, and he brought up the point that it's possible that Samson looks just like a normal man.
Yeah.
It's possible that his arms are not
Right.
big around and
Yeah.
everything. So, and I think with his reputation, that's why they found him the way they did.
Yes.
It's possible that he didn't look like
That's
he was
right.
near as strong as he was.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Which is hard for us to grasp, isn't it? But would that be out of character with God to give some skill to somebody who didn't have the appearance that skill should belong to them?
Look at David. I mean, when he went up against Goliath.
That's exactly right. What about Jesus? What did Jesus look like? We don't really know. We have one hint in the Old Testament that there was nothing desirable about him that we would be surprised that this would be the Savior. And so I think it would be within God's character to him look just like anybody else.
Jesus, him being growing up and learning how to build cabinets with his father, that I mean, he wasn't a weekly.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
building cabinets and stuff is hard work the old way.
Right. All right. We need to get through chapter 16, so I'll move along just a little bit faster here. But I want you to see something that takes place here. So Samson's pretty confident of his strength. He's dependent upon his strength. He felt sure that if he was tied up securely with 2 new ropes, that he would still be able to avenge himself of the Philistines, and he did so. But then in verse 18, we have almost as if God reminds him of his vulnerability here and his need. And in verse 18, he became very thirsty, and he cried out to the Lord and said, "You have given this great deliverance by the hand of your servant, and now shall I die of thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised." This is one of the first times that we see Samson seem to really give credit to God and acknowledge his dependency upon the Lord and call to the Lord and pray to the Lord. And the Lord responds. And the Lord responds by splitting the hollow place in Lehi, and water came out to drink, and his spirit returned and he revived. And so God responds by, I think, acknowledging and confirming what Samson is doing here by his dependence upon the Lord, is calling out to the Lord. And God responds by saying, "That's right, I will provide for you." And so he does something. When was the last time we saw water come from a rock? Yeah, that was a pretty big deal, wasn't it? And so here's another occasion where that happens here. And so Samson calls the place En Hakkore, which means what? Does anybody have a footnote on that? The spring of the caller. He called out to God, and God created this spring for him to drink from. All right. Anything else through chapter 15? Chapter 16. Samson went to Gaza. And so if we look here at Gaza, down here, deep into Philistine territory down here in Gaza. And what does he see with his eyes?
Another woman.
Another woman, a harlot. And he went into her. Well, we thought he was doing better here. He was calling on the Lord, name of the Lord, and yet here we are back to his eyes leading him to the flesh again. And when the Gazites were told that Samson had come there, they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city. They were quiet all night, saying, "In the morning when it's daylight, we will kill him." And Samson lay low till midnight. And then he arose at midnight and took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the 2 gateposts and pulled them up, bar and all, and put them on his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. This is one of my favorite images in the book of Judges, just because the strength and the power of Samson here. You know, these gates were designed to withstand battering rams, to withstand besiegement. These were not like little garden gates that you put, on your garden. These were massive structures. Some have estimated that the city gates were typically several tons in weight, and set so that they would be very difficult to move in any way. Samson goes, grabs a hold of it, yanks them out of the ground, places them on his shoulder, and walks out. What about these people who were standing guard, waiting to make sure he didn't get away? Where are they at this point?
I've wondered that same thing when I was reading.
Yeah, they're not worried about him getting away at this point. They let him get away. And I read one commentator one time, and of course I don't know that there's anything to this, but he was talking about the massive weight of the gates and everything. And he said, so in the morning when the people of Gaza went out, what they would see is a big gaping hole in their wall and sunken footprints all the way up to the top of the hill where the gates were there. And can you just imagine Samson pulling these out, setting them on his shoulder, walking, and then just throwing them down? And it's like, there. What are you going to do? And the Philistines at this point, I think, realize, oh, what can we do to defeat him? And here's the point that I think this is such a strong statement right here, that I would say at 16 verse 3, we could almost say Samson is unstoppable. He's unstoppable. What can stop this man? Nothing can stop this man except, and that leads us into our next story.
You know, he had spent all night that night trying to lay low and not be seen or heard, it seems like.
Mhm.
But when he did this, that would have had to cause
Oh,
an
yeah.
awful lot of commotion.
Yes,
But it's almost like the people are like, we can't do anything,
Yeah.
just go.
that's right. That's exactly right.
But you know, it actually done two things. I mean, one, it showed his strength by doing that. But if you're back then and you had a big city and you don't have no gates to stop anybody from coming in, I mean, it opens up the whole city from anybody from any other area to attack you because there's no way to block the hole.
That's right. So after this mighty demonstration of his invincibility almost, verse 4 says, "Now afterward it happened that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah." I don't know if Delilah was a Philistine woman or not. Certainly she had connections with the Philistines, or will in this. But at this point, we're used to the pattern, aren't we? We're used to the pattern of him and his appetite for women. And where this leads, we've seen how this has already gone. This will be another occasion which the Lord will use, but it will cost him in this. And so the lords of the Philistines came to her and said, "Entice him and find out where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to afflict him, and every one of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver." They didn't even sell this as, if you can tell us, what we'll do is we'll treat him fairly. No, we're going to bind him and afflict him. Now, this is a man that she supposedly loves in some way. He loves her, and they offer this incredible bounty if she's able to pull this off, and it's enough to convince her to do this. And by the way, it says every one of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver. There were 5 lords of the Philistines. And so if each one is giving this amount, this is a fortune that they're offering. And which gives you indication how badly they want Samson and what a threat they see him to be. So,
Also, occasion that them being able to offer that, these are very wealthy Philistines.
yes, well, the Philistines are in control. That's right. So Delilah says to Samson, "Please tell me where your great strength lies and with what you may be bound to afflict you." Now, has Samson ever had dealings with a woman before where she's trying to find out a secret from him? Yes. Yeah. Did it turn out well for him? No. And so you think, all right, he's learned his lesson.
And the Philistines seem to know that. They seem to be attacking his weakness.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that, but they know that this has worked before. So Samson said to her, "If they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings, not yet dried, then I will become weak like any other man." And so what does she do? She tries it. Now I'm just going to tell you, not everybody has 7 fresh bowstrings just sitting in their pantry. And so who does she get these from? The Philistines. But when she wakes him up and says to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you," and he wakes up and he breaks free and he looks down and he says, "Wow, 7 new bowstrings. I wonder where'd you get those?" You would think something's going off here in his mind saying, she's really going to try this. And now there were Philistines, there were men lying in wait to see if this would work. When it didn't work, I suppose that they kept themselves concealed. It didn't come out. But it was no problem. It says, as a strand of yarn breaks when it touches the fire. So his secret was not revealed. Verse 10, then Delilah said to Samson, "Look, you have mocked me and have told me lies. Now please tell me with what you may be bound with." And so he said to her, "If they bind me securely with new ropes that have never been used, then I'll become weak like any other man." I don't know if he thinks this is a game or what, but first of all, this one has already been tried, hasn't it? And that didn't work. But Delilah takes new ropes, binds him, and says, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And there were men again lying in wait, but he broke them with his arms as a thread. And then Delilah said to Samson, until now you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me with what you may be bound. And he said, if you weave my 7 locks of my head into the web of the loom. And so she does it. First of all, he's a heavy sleeper. Because I think about this, and remember, he's a Nazarite, so his hair would probably be pretty long. And some have suggested maybe he had it braided into 7 different braids. That's why the 7 locks. But she takes it. I don't know what size loom this was. Looms were pretty big. And somehow she has him close enough to the loom where she's able to weave it in there and pack it down. And then again, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he awoke from his sleep and he just destroys the whole loom, batten and all. And she said, how can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times and have not told me where your great strength lies. And it came to pass, when she pestered him daily with her words and pressed him so that his soul was vexed to death, that he told her all that was in her heart, in his heart. I think what we have there is we have the description of this man saying, I know what she's going to do, and I don't even care anymore. He was vexed, literally, to where he was willing to die in this. I'll just tell her so that she'll quit pestering me. Isn't this amazing?
It's strange that he goes binding his hands, and then he leads them straight to his hair on the loom, and then tells her, my real strength is in my hair.
Yeah, that's right. So he comes clean, verse 17, no razor has ever come upon my head. I have been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb, and if I am shaven, then all of my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak like any other man. Now, it's interesting that he ties this. Have we seen anything up to this point that ties his strength to his hair? Not that I know of. Now, we would say maybe his strength is in the fact that he's a Nazarite, devoted wholly to the Lord. But he hasn't acted like a Nazarite, has he? But he recognizes that his strength comes from this, and the most obvious sign of a Nazarite would be their long hair. But he recognizes there's a connection there, and he tells her that that's the case. Well, what does he think she's going to do? Well, I think he probably thinks she's going to do this, and she does. And so when Delilah saw that he had told all that was in his heart, she called for the Philistines and said, come up once more, for he has told me all that was in his heart. So the Philistine lords came up and brought her the money in their hand, and she lulled him to sleep on her knees and called for a man and had him shave off his 7 locks of his hair. Then she began to torment him, and his strength left him. And she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he awoke from his sleep, and he said, I will go out before as at other times and shake myself free. Apparently, he's been bound at this point. And he thinks, well, no problem, I've been bound before. But he did not realize that the Lord had departed from him. And the Philistines took him, and they put out his eyes, and they brought him down to Gaza. And they bound him with bronze fetters, and he became a grinder in the prison. Where did they take him?
Where they grind the wheat.
What city? That city with the big gaping hole where this mighty man ripped that gate out of the ground and took it to the hill. Now he comes back in this city bound. And what does he do? He becomes a pack animal. One who just goes around in a circle, grinding like a mule. Amazing. The contrast here of what's happened. The Lord had departed from him. And so the Philistines gathered together, and they're going to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god. This is a image of the Philistine god Dagon. And notice the blasphemy here of the Philistines and what they say. Our God has delivered into our hands Samson, our enemy. No, Dagon had not delivered into their hands Samson. And when the people saw it, they praised their God, for they said, our God has delivered into our hands our enemy, the destroyer of our land, the one who multiplied our dead. And it happened when their hearts were merry that they called for Samson, and they said for him to perform, and they stationed him between the pillars. I don't know what this performance would be. I suspect it was something kind of like a trained bear dancing or something like that, mocking him. Here's this great strong man. Look at him now. Look at him now. Dance for us, Samson. And so Samson said to the lad who held him by the hand, let me feel the pillars which support the temple so that I can lean upon them. I don't know if he's saying, I'm exhausted. Let me rest here. Let me lean against the pillars. By the way, we didn't emphasize this, or I didn't just now. I don't even know if I mentioned. They took him in. What did they do to his eyes? They bored him out. What has been Samson's weakness from the very beginning that we've seen? His eyes. He saw. That came up. She's right in my eyes. And that's the very thing that he loses here because of his following and doing what was right in his own eyes. And so the temple was full of men and women. The lords of the Philistines were there. In fact, there were about 3,000 men and women on the roof which watched Samson while he performed. So you were making the point of how many he killed in his lifetime. Well, this is a packed house here. There's 3,000 on the roof that is here. And in verse 28, Samson called to the Lord, saying, O Lord God. When's the last time we saw him call to the Lord? When he was thirsty. Did the Lord hear him? Yes. What did he call the spring? You can give me the English translation. Spring of the caller. Spring of the caller. He remembers that lesson. He calls to the Lord again. Remember me, I pray. Strengthen me, I pray. Just this once, O God, that I may with one blow take vengeance on the Philistines for my two eyes. I'm a little troubled by what Samson says here. I would like him to say, God, I've learned my lesson, and I learned what my purpose is. You want me to deliver your people from your enemies, the Philistines. I pray, give me strength to do that. That's not how he phrases this. He phrases it, give me strength that I may do what? Avenge myself because of my eyes. That seems fitting with the character that we've seen in Samson. I don't know. Doesn't give a commentary in the Scripture about how God feels about that. But we do know how God responds in this, because Samson took hold of the two middle pillars which support the temple, and he braced himself against it, one on his right and one on his left. And then Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And he pushed with all of his might, and the temple fell. And the lords and all the people who were in it, so that the dead that he killed at his death were more than he had killed in his life. We think about this, and we can picture something like this artist rendition here of what the pillars were like. Interestingly, in almost all of these Philistine cities, there were temples to Dagon and to other gods. And the architecture of the day in these temples, these pagan temples, were to have two center columns in it that supported the roof of that temple. And to give you an idea about their distance apart, here are two different temples with that. That's pretty neat that you can uncover the foundation of some of these temples and say, well, that's how these things were built. And Samson knows that, and so he takes it upon to say, if I can take those two pillars down, I can take this place down. And he does so.
The other thing is that they found archaeology digs, and even in the Egyptian and a lot of the Romans, those columns, now we build them in a solid piece because we got lace and all that to turn. But back in, you'd only carve anywhere from a 4 to 6 foot piece, and then you'd set it, and then you change the size as you went up to where when he actually got between them and pushed on them, I mean, one, that's an act of God, him being able to push them, period. But because it's in pieces, if you was at a certain height, when you could push that out, when you bring two pieces away, all that up above is gonna fall.
Right. So in this, Samson loses his life as well. And so he dies. How long had he judged Israel? 20 years. I wonder if he would have spent that 20 years wholly devoted to the Lord, and the people of the day would have rallied behind him. I wonder what could have happened in delivering them from the hand of the Philistines. But God knew from the beginning that He would not completely deliver them from the Philistines. He would begin to deliver them from the Philistines. Who would completely deliver them from the Philistines? David. That's exactly right. All right, that takes us to end of chapter 16. You will notice in the curriculum that we will not be going straight to 17. We're going to save 17 through the end of the book. For a concluding remark on the period of the Judges, we will be going to 1 Samuel next. So make sure to read ahead in 1 Samuel. Thank you for your good attention. Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.